in a very, very large region that extended all the way from Wisconsin out to Wyoming and Montana. Lakota, Dakota, Nakota, they were all they were all related tribes. Many of us might know them as the Sioux today. That's a word that they don't like so much. They much prefer their indigenous name. They much prefer Lakota. They are were, I should say, a nomadic tribe. They followed the buffalo around on the plains and into the hills and the mountains of the Black Hills. They would set up camp and break it down very regularly. And so they moved where the food was. They would also gather large amounts of their foodstuffs, berries and fruit and roots and things of that nature, as well as different things they used in their spiritual ceremonies, like sage and cedar and sweetgrass. As you can see, it was just a massive, massive area. Well, over time, that area shrank, and it shrank drastically. As the settlers began to move west, they began to seize, take hold of different pieces or parts of the land. They wanted routes where they could pass through the land in order to get to the west coast. You think of like the gold rush in the 1840s. They needed a way to get to the California, and so they had to find a way through the Lakota lands. In the process, the settlers did a great deal of damage. They laid waste to large parts of the land. They especially did great harm to the buffalo herds, in which to them, killing buffalo was a sport, not as a means of subsistence or sustenance, a way of life. And you may have seen photos of literally thousands upon thousands of buffalo skulls with hunters standing on top of them. They would take them for their hide and their tongue, and that was it. They would leave the rest in the plain. Over time, it's not surprising that warfare would break out. And at various times, the treaties were made between the Lakota and the United States. Now, what I'm showing here is the Lakota lands are here, the Ocheti Sakowin. This is the 7 tribes is what that means. But that's the land they were given following the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1851, which you also see are treaties with other Indian tribes that were made at the same time. Every single one of those treaties was broken, unfortunately, on the United States side. We're just going to focus on what happened with the Lakota. In 1868, the large area was made much smaller. After a number of battles, they came together, made another treaty at Fort Laramie, and now their land was reduced down to this size. Whenever gold was found, whenever a new resource was found, unfortunately, the United States felt led to break the treaties and seize those lands for the U.S. If we go a little further, it eventually resulted in what we see today. This right here, this yellow section, this is Pine Ridge. Those are the other Lakota reservations that exist in South Dakota. Bleeds over a little bit, Standing Rock to the north into North Dakota. That's all that remains of that once massive territory that the Lakota had. One thing I want to mention here, and this will come up again later, is very important, are the Black Hills. The Black Hills are seen by the Lakota as the sacred heart of their lands, the most important place for them. It's where their origin stories are from, centered on Wind Cave, we know as Wind Cave National Park. In 1868, the Black Hills were still part of their territory, but after just a few battles later, by 1889, the Black Hills had been seized by the United States. Gold was found, literally small flecks of gold were found, which resulted in a mad rush to mine the Black Hills, and resulted in the final set of battles between what we know as the 7th Cavalry and the Lakota. I'll get to Wounded Knee shortly. The Lakota were put on reservations. What you can't see from a map is that these lands are the most desolate lands, some of the most desolate lands in America. Other tribes in Arizona, New Mexico, and so forth are in other quite desolate lands. Near impossible to survive on these lands. Very, very difficult to grow crops. And I just want to throw out just something to think about. These were a nomadic people who had always moved around the land, who relied on the buffalo and in gathering the roots and berries and fruits for their survival, were put on reservations without any training, teaching, any aid at all to somehow become stationary, sedentary, agricultural farmers on land that can't, well, let's just say, can't grow things easily. Enormous irrigation systems and so forth are needed in order to make it possible. We put the Lakota in a position in which it was near impossible to succeed. Their numbers were about 10% of what they had been at their height. Whether it was smallpox that ran rampant through the different encampments, to the actual just the genocide, the massacres, and the killing over time, they were reduced to just a tiny percentage of what they once were. I want to say, too, before I go into this, I left out a really important thing, was that the Lakota have always had a horrible relationship with Christians. And it was 100% due to the behavior of those who claim to follow Jesus. One of the worst things that happened when they were placed on the reservations, and some of you may know this, have heard about it, were that the children in every family were removed from their homes and sent to boarding schools where they were forced to cut their hair. They were stripped of their Indian names, forced to take Anglican names. They were not allowed to speak their language or practice any of their spirituality. They were forced to become white men and women. They were brutally treated. You've probably heard in the news recently the mass graves that have been found around different boarding schools in the United States and in Canada, where hundreds and hundreds of children lost their lives in these boarding schools. This was the introduction of the Lakota to Jesus. This is how they came to know about Jesus. A killer, an assimilator, one that desired that the people would become westernized, white, living a different culture, abandoning their own. That was the Jesus that they were introduced to. So you can imagine the hard hearts that the Lakota people have to Jesus and to Christianity, and that extends even to this very day. What has this resulted in over time? We heard so much about generational trauma. The trauma passed down from generation, from one to the next to the next. A people who were given nothing with which to survive on other than going to the local agency and getting and pulling their food, well, we know them as food stamps today, rations back then, once a month. They were forced into a dependent lifestyle upon the U.S. government. Were never taught how to farm and how to work the land and somehow try to make an existence for themselves. This has resulted in, and now I'm going to kind of jump to today, because this is what we saw with our own eyes. Widespread addiction, widespread. Almost every single family has multiple addicts in the family. Alcohol, drugs, especially crystal meth, opioids. We were surrounded, in the center in which we stayed, every single day, there were at least 40 homeless who came to the center just to somehow get out of the elements, the rain, and to get a meal. All addicted to one substance or multiple substances. Homelessness, widespread in Pine Ridge. They have a need due to just the homelessness and the overcrowding in the houses that they do have. And the houses that they have are, for the most part, trailers that are in an incredible state of disrepair. They have a need for 12,000 houses right now. Health issues, diabetes and cancer, at extremely high levels, far, far beyond any other community in the United States. Well, when they started testing the water, what did they find? Uranium, arsenic in the water supplies, leading to much of the cancer that the people have. Diabetes, living off bad food, year after year after year, has led to chronic diabetes in the community, which then has led to a huge number of other ailments. Very, high sugar, carbs, fats, very few vegetables and fruits. It ties into the poor education, just a lack of knowledge about agriculture. They don't have the finances to bring in a whole lot of stuff. And when all you know is getting food stamps and getting a certain set of foods, you get addicted to the bad foods. It's why they sell so much today. And so it runs rampant. Unemployment right now, anyone want to guess? 80% unemployment right now in Pine Ridge. What does all this result in? Violence at a level that you can't imagine. The abuse of children, of women, wives, classmates, you name it. We met with an organization called Victim Services, and they have this is the two leaders, directors of Victim Services. On their wall, the MMIW, the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women. Now, these are those who were killed or who are gone missing on the reservation. This doesn't count the hundreds and hundreds who've left the reservation and are suffering in different parts of the country. We heard time and time again about how Rapid City is incredibly racist and how many women lose their lives to non-native men in the city in Rapid City. Life expectancy, men, 48. Women, 52. I could go into the educational issues, the local politics I don't have time to go into. But when there's scarcity, where there's lack, too often politicians are looking out for their own. They're looking out for their own families. It's incredibly corrupt. There's a great disconnect between the needs of the people and the local tribal council. I want to read you the quotes. These are some quotes that I just wrote this week. These were quotes heard by our team in all the meetings we had this week. We were a very proud nation at one time. Wounded Knee continues to be a dagger through our heart. When the Black Hills were taken away, it was as if our hearts were ripped out, as if our mother were being raped. We have never recovered. By and large, we have given up. We are weak. We have given up fighting. We are all waiting to die. Death on the reservation. Death on the reservation is becoming normalized. All Lakota are unsika, which means pitiful, in need. There is very little natural death at Pine Ridge. There is a lot of unnatural death. We are like cattle, brainwashed, as we line up for our rations once a month. A black cloud of despair looms above us here. As a people, we are in crisis constantly. That's just the ones that I was able to write down as I heard them. This is what we traveled into. I knew things were bad. I didn't know they were as bad as what we saw. But I want to kind of switch gears and talk about our team, because we were just blessed. What a great, great team. We had Corinne, Melanie, Brenda, and I saw Raphael. You guys can all just stand up real quick, please. Just a great, great team. Very tight. Very close. I would say very mature. Able to handle what they witnessed. Very brave. Very faith-filled. Very compassionate. Very spiritual. I felt the witness that this team exhibited was a beautiful one. Something that I think Pine Ridge desperately needed and needs. It continues to need. And I'll have more to say about what we're hoping Oakbrook might do in the future or what role we might have. But this group left their families for a week and really just gave themselves over, put themselves in God's hands, and said, God, open our eyes, help us to listen, help us to connect, help us to love, help us to learn. And that's what the group did. And I was just blessed, really, to be a part of it. So we went to a place called the Pine Ridge Reconciliation Center. The center has been in the town of Pine Ridge for many, for 30 years, but in different iterations, different forms. About 3 years ago, Pastor, this is what it looks like on the outside, and you'll see there's some of the visitors, the guests out front. 3 years ago, Pastor Dan Johnson on the right took over the center and has kind of changed its focus. In the past, it focused a lot on children. It focused on some small ministries. But what was just looming everywhere, they were surrounded with were immediate needs. People who were hungry, people who were homeless, people who were freezing out in the cold. And imagine South Dakota winters are brutal from what we hear. They realized that they needed to do things differently. And so there are 5 things they do. I'm going to talk about the common basket first, which is number 3, in which they have basically opened up their doors every morning at 9 o'clock so that all of the homeless, those with addictions, those who are hungry can come in and get shelter, can take a shower, can eat, get just the things that they need. It is a huge effort. The staff is overwhelmed by everything that they're seeing and everything they're trying to deal with and minister to. You can imagine guys coming in on crystal meth and other guys coming in who are absolutely, drunk, beyond drunk, and the issues that can rise up in that kind of an environment. It's like the tyranny of the urgent. They have to address all of these things right before them. But I think they don't have a choice, because if those immediate needs aren't going to be met, it's just going to be very difficult to get to do much else. And that's an area where I think they need some help. They need some help quickly. They have a Job Corps where they're hiring those, many of whom had been addicts at one time. There's some Christians, some non-Christians, but they're trying to get people jobs. The entire staff who work with all these people. They're part of this Job Corps. They have others who go out when they hear about major issues in people's houses. A hailstorm came in and wiped out like all of the windows in one part of the reservation. They sent out teams to fix all of those windows. They're just constantly, again, responding to every need that they can hear about and that comes up. Kid times, they still have the kids that are coming in. They have an energy matching program. But I'm going to focus today on the immersion teams because that's what we are. They have decided that the world needs to know about what's going on in Pine Ridge. And the only way they feel the world is going to know is if the world comes to them and actually lives there and can see with their own eyes what's happening. And so we were one of those teams. Landed in Pine Ridge. We lived in that building. So our home turned into a Wild West kind of bizarre place at times, as just all these folks came in dealing with all their different issues. But it was a beautiful thing to see at how every single one of the people who came through those doors was loved on and served and taken care of. It's an amazing effort that goes on there. On the left is Tony Walking. Many of these names you'll hear are shortened from their indigenous last names. He just took Walking, but there's another set of words to that. I don't know if it was like walking with wolves or whatever, but Tony Walking. What a sweet, sweet man. He's now the full-time director of the Immersions. We got to know him very well, had a chance to pray for him on our last night. I got to hit two things. This is Abram Newman. Abram just felt called to pick up everything and go live in Pine Ridge. And Abram oversees, they did have a night shelter to get people out of the cold in the winter, prompted by a man who froze to death out on the streets. And so they had that. It ran all through the winter, just got shut down by the tribal government. They were trying to now find a new location to get the night shelter going again. Abram's working on these projects and has all sorts of neat ideas for more. And then we got to spend time with the staff. Here you'll see a variety of folks. I'll introduce you to some of them later. Just, again, beautiful, beautiful people that we were able to serve side by side with throughout the week. Our immersion was at many different levels. It was spiritual, historical, cultural, political, economic, geographic. We learned about research initiatives, social justice initiatives, public health issues. We learned a little bit of the language. I mean, it's a full immersion into the culture of Pine Ridge, which is really an immersion into the culture of the Lakota people, which is absolutely fascinating. I need to spend at least a moment talking about Wounded Knee, because if there's one event in the history, if you could pick a momentary sort of point of time that's really, I think, is most deeply embedded in the hearts of the people, is Wounded Knee. Wounded Knee, 1890, was a massacre of Lakota who were in an encampment. They were gathering together for what they called the ghost dance. The tribe had by and large been defeated in battle. This was a group that was really no threat to anyone. The day before, they had been forced to give up all their weapons. The next day, something happened where they were trying to disarm another Native American. There's a lot of fingers pointing, but a shot rang out, and it turned into an absolute massacre of men, women, and children. There's disputes of how many died, but it's believed 250 or more men, women, children were killed at Wounded Knee. This is Wounded Knee. The massacre took place right on this plain here. And the cavalry came down from the hills all around, and there was this complete surrounding of the encampment. Some were able to escape, so we do have some eyewitness accounts that helps us to know what actually transpired. They were able to escape in a ravine up this way towards the actual town of Wounded Knee, about half a mile away. There are also photos of Wounded Knee out there. Most of them I'm not going to show you, but I will show you one. Massive burial trench was dug on the hillside or hilltop there, and many of the bodies were put there. There's believed to be another mass burial site of the women and children. It hasn't been located yet, but there are photos that exist of the dead women and children, yet that gravesite has not been found. We were allowed to walk around the trench. We were not allowed to walk on the trench where they were buried. There's a monument there that lists all of the dead who were buried in that trench, the names of the men who were buried there. We had our eyes opened wide to the details of all of this by a man named Kelly Lookinghorse, who had relatives that escaped that encampment that day and survived. He had distant relatives who were killed that day as well. But just a wonderful man, and sang, prayed over that spot with us, and it was a very sacred moment. Part of our immersion I mentioned was in a cultural immersion, trying to help us to see that this, a town which in so many ways, and a reservation which in so many ways is a mess, is steeped in just some amazing, just a cultural tradition. And we were exposed to a lot of the art, different types of things. We made dream catchers. We watched Valerie Brown Eyes in the bottom right corner do quill art with porcupine quills, creating bracelets and other things. Kevin, whoops, hit the wrong thing. Kevin Poorbear did this incredible piece of art, as well as several others that will be one which was going to end up in our hallway here, hopefully soon. Is it? Oh, it's on, thank you. It's on the table that you can see afterwards. That as he was telling his life story with pastels, just did this incredible piece of art right in front of us. We learned about ledger art, which is like a form of protest art from a man named Joe Pulliam. This is art that is on documents and things that have been acquired that represent the white colonization of the Sioux lands. And so I have a piece that I put over there. You'll see it's a stock certificate from a mining company in 1943. And he does his Lakota art in watercolor on the actual document. This company went out of business long ago. It was a mining company that set up shop in the Black Hills to mine for gold. It's no longer, but the Lakota civilization lives on. So it's a style of protest art, which they call ledger art. So we learned a great deal about the Lakota attachment to the land, and this is just a bleeding wound that they carry as so much of their land was taken to them. And part of that is the buffalo. I was so excited to see buffalo, first of all, because they're like an amazing, majestic beast, creature, but also because of the attachment of the Lakota to the buffalo. These are wild buffalo that you can go see, and it's just an amazing, they'll right there off the side of the road or on the road. And this is in the Black Hills, the foothills of the Black Hills. The Black Hills, as I mentioned, is the most sacred region to the Lakota, and we spent a day in the Black Hills just being blown away and amazed by their beauty. After hearing the full story of Mount Rushmore, as a team, we made the decision not to go to Mount Rushmore, which is considered to be a blight upon the land, that the heads of 4 white colonizers were chiseled into one of the most sacred mountains to the Lakota. It's it's blasphemous to the Lakota. Just the wildlife was amazing. Coyotes we saw, deer, pronghorn, antelopes, thousands of prairie dogs, maybe more. In Wind Cave National Park, as I mentioned, is part of the origin stories. I don't have time to tell it today, but we heard about the origin stories of the Lakota people. And this is, I'll have a lot to say about Virgil Red Cloud Good, who's a 6th generation descendant of the great chief Red Cloud of the Lakota. This is the natural opening to Wind Cave, and literally, depending on the time of day, the pressure changes. And so it's either blowing out or it's sucking in, as if the earth is literally breathing. It's just an amazing thing to experience. While we were there, it was fortunate, it was blowing out. It was quite refreshing. That's inside the cave. We visited Sheep Mountain in the Badlands. So the Badlands obviously are incredibly beautiful. But I challenge any of you to try to grow anything there. And that's what they're working with over so much of the reservation. A few of us were a little more bold than the rest in going out on a little neck of land. Sorry, Corinne, you're probably going to get scolded here afterwards. Just incredible beauty. I've got just a few minutes here, and I want to talk a little bit about the relationship between Lakota people and Christianity. I talked to you about the witness that they've had from Christians over time. And so there's a real disdain for Christians, and that exists today. Lakota who are followers of Jesus are routinely ridiculed on the reservation by the non-Christians. And so you imagine, just with the witness that's been put forth, traditional evangelism efforts just don't go anywhere. The people are they're shut down. They don't want to hear about it. It just brings up horrible, horrible memories and stories have been passed down over the years. And so Pastor Dan Johnson fully believes, and I agree with him, that preaching at them, evangelizing them is not what's needed. What's desperately needed is a real-life, practical living out the ways and teachings of Jesus in their midst. It's the only way there's going to be any kind of breaking through about the one whom we follow, is by putting him on display. Important part of this, though, is presence. Like, you can't put things on display without actually being there. You need to be in and among the people, building relationships of trust, so they can actually experience your love and your care and your support and your encouragement and your embraces and your prayers. And so that literally they have a physical human being whom they can connect with. And another part of this, and this was really helpful, a couple of the folks on the team were sharing this in the car that was yesterday morning. Seems like a long time ago. Is that there's a story that needs to be told. And most people either don't have the time or the desire to listen to the indigenous people tell their story. But there are those of us who can tell the story. And as Christians, I believe we need to tell the story. That it's actually, we need to take our place of privilege and use that so that we can announce, to herald to the world, that there's incredible hardship here, incredible injustice here, of which the vast majority of it is the doing of the nation that we call our own. The writer of Proverbs says, "Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly, defend the rights of the poor and needy." It's part of who we're called to be. I mentioned Virgil, red cloud, good. This is just red cloud. I don't know, maybe you've seen the photograph around, but just an incredible chief back in the day. But both Virgil and Basil Braveheart, 80 years old, are both followers of Jesus who practice Lakota spirituality. I want to say here, and this is without any shame or frustration or nervousness or anything, is that there's a great deal that we can learn as followers of Jesus from Lakota people, from Lakota spirituality, if we would humble ourselves and really listen and observe. These followers of Jesus understand the God of the Bible to be the Great Spirit in Lakota spiritual understanding, that they are one and the same. And they see absolutely no problem in that the Great Spirit sent his Son, literally put on flesh and came into the world so that the world could better know him. Works in no problem with Lakotan spiritual beliefs. They just see Jesus as the one that helps them to know this Great Spirit a little bit better. And this is really important. They also use Lakota rituals in pursuing connection with the Great Spirit, meaning they pursue God, yes, using some of the forms we might, like if they go to a church there on Pine Ridge. But they also see that there's great benefit, there's great fruit from doing things like dancing in powwows, to going to sweat lodges, burning sage and sweetgrass and cedar and tobacco, what they call smudging, using that as part of their services. That they're forms of Lakota spirituality, a practice that helps them in their pursuit of God. They encourage their non-native brothers, those in their midst, to do the same. Abram, who I mentioned earlier, has gone to a sweat many a time with the Lakotas and found it very powerful in his own personal walk and encounter with God. And I'm going to take, maybe this is a good thing to close on, it's said like we would say amen after a prayer. Lakota say, mitakuye o yasin, at the end of every prayer. What it means is we are all related, that all is connected. It's the central part of Lakota spirituality. You know, there's like a lot of similar stuff in the Bible. This is the same types of things in the Bible. That we're in one, in Christ, that, you know, he's before all things, yet in him all things hold together. In Ephesians, you know, the one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and all. This idea that literally God infuses everything. Every human being, just as we say, is created in God's image, every human being is infused with God. And by everyone being connected, Lakota see as their responsibility that they would connect with others, all others. In some situations, though, they're having a little trouble trusting, as you can understand why. But it's a primary part. When we think of this concept of shalom in the Old Testament, shalom, this wholeness, this fullness, this peace, the belief is shalom can only be truly achieved when everyone has shalom. You can't have shalom if it comes at the expense of other people, because they'll constantly be crying out, fighting back, rebelling, somehow trying to achieve their own place of shalom. True shalom is when everyone has it. It's the same concept using different words and a different approach. But all are connected. All is connected. If we internalize that as followers of Jesus, there is nobody who we can turn our backs on. That we are connected with everyone. That every good thing we do, every good thing we say has positive impact on the whole. Every negative thing we do, every bad thing we say, every evil thing that comes out of us or our own government, our own culture, whatever it might be, tears down the whole thing. That we're all connected. If we could internalize that, just think how much more beautiful our witness would be. But it's not just with people. It's with creatures. It's with all of the animals and birds, etc. It's with actually the world in which we live. And so that it's incumbent upon us that we take care of where we live. I'm like sitting here like, this is like a lot of things we teach, but it just comes at it from a whole different angle, a different perspective, but it's the same. I was like so excited and like, wow, we're not like altogether different. These are not like the other, that we are connected with these people. And to be honest, we treated them like crap for so long. And it's time for a different way forward. This whole concept's in their art. This is one I'm going to put in my office. But literally the buffalo, the most sacred animal to Lakota, different colors, black, red, yellow, white, is supposed to be for black people, red people, yellow people, white people, that all are one, all are connected. Oops, I hit the wrong thing, Cicero. I'll pull it over here. Oh, yay. The little medicine wheel you see there, it's the different colors, again, captured in the medicine wheel, which is a long explanation, but it represents each of the directions there. But again, the white, the black, the red, and the yellow, trying to get at this all-connected thing again. And so we saw lots of areas of hope while we were there. It was amazing some of the things we see that are happening despite all of the problems and abuse and everything else. We went to a research company called Missouri Breaks. Missouri Breaks. They're doing research into what? The water. Whenever they find a well which has too much arsenic, too much uranium, they shut it down. They're working to kind of transform the whole water supply issue. They have a heart study in which they're trying to work out all the connections with diabetes and heart disease, trying to bring relief and some help into that area. I've got it here. Where is it? An opiate use disorder study, a family study, strong Lakota family study. There's, a lot of neat things happening. We visited a place called Red Cloud Renewable Energy. 1,300 students have gone through their school and learning how to primarily solar, but some wind, and how to bring solar into Pine Ridge. 1,300 people over time. The challenge is retaining them and keeping them on the reservation when you got solar companies like on the East Coast hiring them for like 15 times they could make on the reservation. That's a challenge. But they're working on these really cool tiny houses that cost $35,000 to build. They rely on solar, and they've got ideas for how they can deal with this 12,000 house shortage. They can sprinkle these all over the place. Are there going to be challenges? Yeah, but it's signs of hope. We heard of entire families turning away from alcohol, just getting free from it as an entire family unit. We heard about social workers creating programs inside the local high school for assisting students that are suffering with trauma and abuse when they come forward of trying to get them the counseling and the help that they need. So we saw the areas of hope, and that certainly got us excited about it. What's really cool is Virgil's uncle, Henry Red Cloud, is the head of Red Cloud Renewables. So this guy, he's got some good genes or something. It's some really amazing people. All right, I've gone 5 minutes over. The way ahead for Oak Brook. These are just our thoughts, and they're very preliminary, but just want to share these with you. First, the team members, the 5 of us, endeavored to stay in close contact with the key individuals that we met in Pine Ridge. Pastor Johnson, Dan Johnson, Tony Walking, Virgil Red Cloud Good, Abram, others, Henry Red Cloud, others. The team feels it's very worthwhile and important for Oak Brook to send future teams to Pine Ridge Reconciliation Center. We believe that this is an exposure and opportunity that would be amazing for as many people to experience as possible. There's a great deal that all of us can learn there. The team encourages Oak Brook to financially support Pine Ridge Reconciliation Center going forward, and all you as well. If that's something that interests you in some way, please let me know, and I will get you the information of how you can do that. Also, individual team members are sensing possible future involvement in certain ongoing or even new programs in Pine Ridge. The transitional housing program, for one. Agriculture, the idea of developing possibly a farmer's market there where fruit and vegetables, things that are so desperately needed in their diets, might be, which is a big deal. We have to get more and more people involved in agriculture and so forth, but a way of making money, getting good food into the population and so forth. And then also working in Christian and Lakota relations, as well as the spiritual connection and growth of Christians by learning and drawing from Lakota spirituality. So that's basically a summary of the trip. I want to thank all of you for your prayers. Thank you for your encouragement, and we feel blessed that Oak Brook supports trips like this, of expanding our horizons, connecting with different people groups, especially those who are different than we are. We're realizing how much we can learn from people who are different than we are. It doesn't make our love for God or our image of God any smaller. It only makes it much, much, much bigger and greater. So with that, I want to thank you all. I apologize for going a little bit over. Happy Mother's Day to all of you. I hope you enjoy your time together with your families today. Thanks.